Welcome, everyone. My name is Travis from the Department of Economics here in CHK. I'll be the one who introduced Professor Junsen Zhang. Professor Junsen Zhang is a Wayland Professor of Economics. He has been a chairman of our department since 2012. And in 2013, he has been a fellow of the Econometric Society. He has been the editor of the Journal of Population Economics. When I look at his CV, he has roughly around 100 academic papers published in leading journals. And he has phenomenal work on developing and analyzing China's twin dataset. And the latest wave of that dataset is coming along, and it looks into the long-term well-being of the twins. Roughly around 10 years ago, I came to this department. I didn't really check out everyone's profile. So I went and knocked on his door. That was the very first time I saw him. And I asked him what he does. He was very surprised because I was the one who was supposed to check him out. And then he said, well, population and demography. Please welcome Professor Junsen Zhang.
Travis, thank you for your nice introduction. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about this topic on filial piety, old age support, and children's gender composition. The key thing is about children's gender composition. This one is, okay. So the main research question I will ask is, do parents cultivate children's preference for old age support? That's the main question of this paper. Oh, by the way, this is a joint work with my PhD student, Ruofei Guo. Okay, so if we look at some important citation here, so the rules for students, a Chinese classic to be recited by children. The rules for students are the sage teaching. First of all, be filial to parents and be respectful to the elder, and then to be reverent and trustworthy. Okay, so those are the key virtues a person should have, and the parents' teaching or school teaching should try to nurture. Gary Becker, in his Nobel speech, he said, the parents worried about old age support may try to instill in their children's feeling of guilty, obligation, duty, and filial love that indirectly but still very effectively can commit children to helping the parents out. So again, the message is very similar. So what about the literature on this thing? Murphy and Becker and his co-author on this issue is mainly theoretical and some informal evidences. Okay? So the gap in the literature is that there has been no systematic empirical evidence that parents nurture children's preferences for old age support. And this is a gap we try to fill, to provide the first set of evidence. So first, we look at this graph, which will tell us something about the gender or the sex aspect of the problem. So if we look at the co-residence, this is 2000 census data, China census, year 2000. So we look at the proportion of sons co-residing with parents, okay? Those are the one-child family, right? So they are the young. One-child policy was started in 1979 or 1980. So those are the one-child family. So we can ignore those. But even here, the sons are over 50%, right? If it's just one child, then it should be half, right? It should be 50. It should be flat here. But it's slightly more boys because of the gender selection, because, gender selective abortion. So the boys are slightly more over here. But look at here, for adults 20 to 60, it's overwhelmingly the boys co-residing with their parents. So it's up to 80% or going all the way up. Okay, so that is the main saying fact we are going to base on, that the parents in China, especially in rural China, still very much want to co-reside or to have their old age support from their son. Now, so what we do in this paper is the gender composition is a proxy reflecting the variation in the supply of old age support. Given that parents want to old age support from the son, so the gender composition reflects the variation in the supply of old age support. Okay? The main innovation in terms of methodology of this paper is this, which overcome all the problem in the literature, which I will talk about later. It's that in the literature, the gender composition is a long-standing problem, but there is no good way of solving it. Some people using, a lot of people, very famous people, I don't want to mention their names, they just use sex composition to look at on the family outcomes, and so as if they are exogenous, but people realize it's endogenous. Some people try to use some kind of IV, but it's not very good. Anyway, so the main innovation is this. The one-child policy, right? It's very unique in China. So basically, when you have a twin birth, you basically shut down your additional births. If you have a child, in urban, of course, definitely shut down. In rural, if you have a twin birth, you're going further, it's also a small percent. I will come to that later. And then using the sex composition of the twin. So it's two natural experiments here. Well, one natural experiment based on the twin, and one policy experiment, right? The one-child policy combined with the twin shut down the fertility decision. Okay? So what we find is that having a brother instead of a sister will reduce the demand for older age support. Right? So if you are a sister, right, if you are a girl, if you have a brother, then the demand on your old age support for your parents will be reduced. And also reduce the instilling of the filial piety. Okay? But there is no effect on the instilling of fraternity. Okay? So that is a placebo test. Right? So for the parents' perspective, they have this thing with the son. So there should be a gender angle, what we call gender asymmetric effect, which I will elaborate later on. But for the love among the siblings, right, from the parents' point of view, there should be no gender aspect. So there are three contributions in this paper. There are papers by Becker and Zirabotti, and they talk about preference cultivation. Again, it's very much theoretical, so we provide the first empirical study of this issue. I already mentioned effects of sibling gender composition, right? A lot of those people. And we tackle the endogeneity of sibling gender composition very effectively. And furthermore, we have some evidence that, and we also want to make the point that the public transfer would crowd out private transfer by weakening the traditional filial piety education, right? So we don't need operative bequest. In the literature, if you have an operative bequest, then the government program will be neutralized, right? And so on. But here we don't need that operative bequest because the public program will weaken the nurturing of the traditional education. And this is robust to altruism, guilt, and other motives. Okay, so a little bit theoretical or conceptual discussion. So in the paper, we have a simple model. First, to illustrate how this filial piety education can facilitate efficient family allocation. So in the horizontal axis, we have children's wealth or children's consumption. Vertical axis, we have the parental wealth or parental consumption. So this is a production frontier. You think the family thing. So without the filial piety education, the outcome is here. The parents will just choose to consume here and the child consume here. But if this filial piety is effective, then parents can first transfer some money to the child, and then the child will be more human capital investment and so on. Then the initial equilibrium will be here, and then in the next period, the son will transfer money to the parents for old age support, leading to a new equilibrium at point C. So then both the parents and the children could be worse off by moving the equilibrium from A to C through this intergenerational transfer and this commitment, family commitment, once the parents can commit the children to support them at old age. So this is another graph which shows this is old age support. So that this graph will illustrate how the gender composition comes into the picture. So old age support is horizontal, and this is vertical. You can think as parents' willingness to pay. Okay, so this is a demand for old age support. Now supply curve. Okay, so if you have two girls, it's like this, and sons, because the parents educate the son, or they may prefer son, or may the sons have lower marginal cost of providing old age support. So the son's supply curve is below the girls. Okay? So if you have two girls, then it's one girl provides this and two girls provide a second provides this, then they will share the old age support. If you have one boy and one girl, then the parents will rely on the son because the son is at the lower marginal cost, right? So the son will provide DE, and it will be here, okay? But if it's two sons, then they may be rotating, and then the equilibrium could be here. So the gender composition will determine how the parents, where will be the equilibrium and who will be the old age support provider, okay? So there are two main hypotheses and a few other results which are not as rigorous as the hypothesis, but still very enlightening. So the first hypothesis is if a child has a brother instead of a sister, parents are less or equal likely to seek old age support from the child. So if you have a brother, and if you are also a boy, then it's equally likely. But if you are a girl, if you have a brother, the parents will try to put the education on the boy, right, and rely less on the girl, right? So the magnitude of the negative impact of the sibling gender on parents' expectation of the old age support is larger for daughters than for sons. Okay, so this is what we mean by gender asymmetric effect. So the negative effect is bigger for the girls, because if it's a girl, then basically the parents will not try to do this kind of education on you. But if you're a boy, then both boys will be educated for this traditional thing. So that is for the old age support business, right? Okay, related on the filial piety, if a child has a brother instead of a sister, then parents are less likely or equal likely to instill filial piety in the child. Okay, and the magnitude of the negative impact of sibling composition on parents instilling of the filial piety is larger for daughter. Again, so this is on where be the focal action, who will be the targets, right? And we will look at some evidence on this. And this again, we will see whether the parents take action in education on this thing. So we will provide 2 or 3 pieces of evidence about old age support and about this education. Okay, so I mentioned the endogeneity earlier. Theoretical prediction, right, relies on exogenous variation in the sibling gender composition conditional on family size. But almost all existing study on effects of sibling gender composition does not deal with the endogeneity or deal with it very imperfectly. So we realize even if the gender of each child is random, the gender composition is not random, right? And then through the confounding family size change. So if you want a boy, but if you have a girl, then you have another birth. If it's still a boy, then you may continue. So the gender composition will be correlated with the error term in whatever equation you are looking at, right? And then it will also cause change in the family size, which may again affect the outcome variable. So endogeneity business, right, as I already said, so the son preference is not only a phenomenon in China, right? In this paper in Review of Economic Study, they show in the US, they also have boy preference. They have boy preference, and some study show that there is maybe mixed gender preference, okay? So I already mentioned that through the confounding family size change, the gender composition will be endogenous. Okay, so the data set we are going to use, as I already said, the main innovation in terms of methodology is a one-child policy, basically shut down the fertility choice once you have a twin birth. And the data is, we did a paper I did with Mark in 2002, and then we followed up in 2013. So it's a second wave. In the second wave, we have those questions about traditional education, about family values, which we will see. So this is the data set we are going to use. So fertility distribution. So look at urban. If you have a twin births in the first birth, then the percentage of going to further births is less than 3%. Okay? If you have, in the rural, if you have a twin at the first birth, then there may be 13%. So overall, it's 7%. So it's not a high number, which we will ignore, but we will control all those variables we think might affect fertility, okay? We do the results for urban and rural separately, and they are both consistent. Although with combined sample, it's the statistic power is better. Okay, so who violates the thing, the one-child policy? So if you have a twin, and if it's same-sex female, then they might go ahead and do a second birth, okay? And then the other thing is mother's schooling and the mother's age at birth of the twin, okay? So those are the key variables which we will control in our analysis. Sex ratio, is twin a random thing, right? So the sex ratio of the twin is very well behaved, right? If the twin somehow is so that means the twins does not seem to be subject to gender selective abortion, right? The sex ratio is 1.04, right? And then we also run a multinomial logit just to see who are those people have the same-sex twins, opposite-sex twins, and the base outcome is male same-sex twins. So we have 3 categories, right? Male same-sex, female same-sex, and opposite same-sex. And we find virtually, other than this maternal age at twin birth, there are virtually none is significant. So that's also good news for us. So in the questionnaire, we ask those key questions. Expectation of old age support, answered by the parents. So we ask the parents, when you are old, which child would you and your spouse rely on for financial support? Keyword, for financial support, if you get into financial difficulty. So this is real about old age support. You know, one might be concerned, you want to live with the son, is it because of some preference? You want to, although our theoretical framework is okay with that too, because the lower marginal cost can be thought of as you have a favor, you have a preference for the son, so you know that lower your marginal cost. If you monetize the preference, the utility preference into money term, right? But here, this question is really asked about the old age support at face value, right? So would you like to provide old age financial support if you get into financial difficulty? And the second question in old age support thing is, when you are old, which child would you prefer to live with? So in both questions, the respondent will fill in the name of the person of the child, which child, okay? So with the name, okay? Or evenly spread, so okay. Okay, so those two are the key questions. And about instilling of filial piety and fraternity, the questions are this. When you were young, how often did your parents tell you that having filial respect for elderly is a fine virtue? How often? Okay, how often? Okay, and also about sibling love. Okay, when you were young, how often did your parents tell you that having sibling love, is a fine virtue? Okay, so those three are the main things. The first two is about old age support, and this is about home teaching, home education about traditional value or about respect for the elderly and caring and loving between the siblings. So this is some statistics. So age and male co-twin and those things. Expectation of old age, so we have dummy, dependence, whether dependent on that child. Co-residence, whether you want to live with that child when you are old. And preference cultivation, right? So we have the education on with the children towards parents and among siblings. Okay, those are all 5-point skills. And we also look at parental style as a placebo test. Okay, so parental style, when you don't get good study results, or when you are some bad behavior, how the parents will punish you. Okay, so there could be spank you, could be lock you up, and so on and so forth. And then we use factor analysis to extract the parental style, which I will report later on. And there is also proxy of utility. Okay, so there is subjective well-being, feeling of delight, feeling of enjoyment, happiness, and so on. Here we use principal component analysis to extract the variable. Okay, and then we also look at children's education outcomes. Those are the set of the education children's outcome. Okay, so briefly, if we look at about the expectation of old age support. So if you are male, right? So if you are male, whether your co-twin is a male or not doesn't really matter, right? So the change is very little. But look at here, if you are female, and if your co-twin, if you have a male co-twin, right, then your chance of being expected for old age support is much lower than if you have a female co-twin. If you have a female co-twin, then the chance you are expected of old age support is say 0.78. But if you have a male co-twin, immediately drop significantly.
So in the questionnaire, you're going to allow them to choose a split unevenly. For example, if they want son 60% and daughter 40%, then they will choose son, right?
Yeah, okay, so we have, please fill the name of the child. Or choose even split.
Yeah, if you prefer like 60% from son and 40% from daughter, then they will put the name of the son here.
Mm-hmm.
So that will overestimate the son's contribution.
But son is still higher, right? Son, by fact, as you described, is still higher, whether there is a bias or not. But I need to check this detail. Yeah, it's a good point, yeah. Okay, so those graphs all seem similar message. So let me go to the main thing. Oh, this may be of interest. Okay, parenting style. In this paper, we look at it as a placebo test. Okay, I will explain why. But actually, it's also of its own interest. So if you have a male co-twin, the chance of being punished is much higher. Okay, so whether you have a male twin, right, this line, or if you have a female, right, the male twin line is always. So there could be some spillover effect, or as long as you have a female co-twin, then it's the authoritarian punishment is more likely. So let's look at some regression which may be more rigorous. So we have outcome variable, right? We have a gender co-twin. So this is the main variable of the analysis. What is the sex of the co-twin? Is it male? Okay, if it's a male, then equal to 1. Okay. And then by our two hypotheses, our main focus is look at interaction between whether the co-twin is male and whether yourself is male or female, right? Our two hypotheses is that this beta 2 would be negative. So if you are female, if you have a co-twin who is male, then you are much less likely to be expected of old age support, right? And also inferior education. You are much less likely to receive traditional education. So it's in either old age support or filial piety. So look at the old age support, right? So female sample, right? Female sample, if you have male co-twin, then you are much less likely to be expected of dependence. Dependence means parents rely on you for old age support. Okay, so if we go to the interaction specification, right, so if you have a male co-twin, then, and if you are female, then you are far more less likely to be expected of old age support. Co-resident, same message. So if you have a male co-twin and you are female, then you are much less likely to be co-residing, to be expected to be co-residing with your parents during their old age. Okay, and this is education of traditional family value, right? So again, this interaction, so for female sample, right, if you have a male co-twin, then you are less likely to be received of filial piety education. And interaction, although this is not very significant, T is about 1 point something, but here look at when we control with all the controls, it's still highly significant. So those two hypotheses have support from the empirical evidence. Okay, so now the two things as a placebo test. Okay, the filial piety, right, fraternity and parental style are important dimensions of preference nurturing. But only the first one has this gender asymmetric effect. The other two should not have gender asymmetry. So we take them as a placebo test. We think there should be no gender asymmetric effect for the next two. So filial piety, older age support, Becker, and so on. Fraternity, right? Junjin Ye has a paper on sibling commitment device. Parental style, as I mentioned, there are some emerging papers on this thing. But we look at these two as a placebo test to see if they have no gender asymmetric effect. So I already said that. So here again, the key variable here is beta 2. So if beta 2 is for sibling love with each other or parental style, we expect beta 2 to be 0. Right? So when you educate your children, as far as themselves are concerned, you want to be them friendly to each other, care about each other. So the beta 2 should not have this gender-specific thing, okay, or parental style. So fraternity, right? So male co-twin, female, indeed as predicted, right? So it shouldn't have this gender asymmetric effect, right? So this passed the first placebo test. And then we look at this authoritarian parenting style. Again, whether you have a male co-twin or female co-twin, the style is the same, okay, as far as this interaction term is concerned. Although, as I said, the male co-twin itself, right, is effect. It has some things. Maybe more boys, you teach them harder, but there is no gender asymmetric effect as far as this is concerned. If you hit one child harder, you hit both harder. Yeah. And if your children, as long as there is one boy in your family, you are going to hit them all harder. And that's the result from this. By the way, this twin data is very good, right? When Mark and I started, 10 years ago, it's a census type of all the twins in Kunming City. It's a very big city. So it's all the twins. Yeah. Okay. We also have some implication about whether it's altruism or whether it's guilt. Okay? So the instilling of the filial piety may work through two types of changes in children's utility function. So here we have this definition. Altruism, right? You really care about your parents, okay, as we all know, right? So children support parents because they care about parents. And children get higher utility if they are filial to their parents, right? I pay my parents a visit, I buy them a cake, I buy them a car, right, or a massage machine, right? They are happy, I'm also happy. Okay, guilt, right? Becker constantly uses the word guilt. So children support parents to avoid utility losses. So this definition here is different. You want to avoid feeling guilty, okay? So children should have the same utility level either they receive the instilling or not. Here you receive this education, you help out, you're very happy. Here you receiving it or not, you don't feel you suffer. Okay, so here the prediction is this. So again, this interaction term, beta 2 is expected to be negative if filial piety works through altruism, right? Because if you have a male co-twin and if you are female, right, and you know the education is go to the male co-twin and you are not educated. So if there is altruism, right, then this sister will feel not as happy as another sister who has a female co-twin. Right? So the comparison is about whether your co-twin is a male or female. But if it's guilty, right, then whether your sibling, this co-twin, receive, this education or not, you feel there is no loss or no gain. So we expect if it's guilt, then beta 2 is 0, and otherwise it's less than. So if we look at this interaction again, right? So it's indeed negative and significant. So it looks like this filial piety is working through altruism. Okay, educational outcomes. A lot of studies in economics, right? They look at gender composition on education outcomes and on other resources allocation. A lot of studies, and they all suffer from this endogeneity of gender composition problem, right? So when we do this with the natural experiment, right, of course, or still control for other variables, the male co-twin female is not significant in any of the education human capital. So child investment, years of schooling, self-study rank, actual score in examination, it's not significant in any of the specification. There's no gender asymmetric effect. Okay, so that casts caution on all the entire literature on the gender composition on education outcomes and other outcomes. Okay, finally, I want to comment on the public versus private old age support, right? So far we have 3 equations, right? The old age dependence, right? We have this, whether you are male or female, and co-residence, and filial piety, and so on, right? So now we add this PK over here. This PK can be 2 things. An indicator variable of access to public provision of old age support, and reimbursement ratio of medical expenses. Of course, those 2 variables are suspicious, right? Because whether your family has access to public provision, that might be endogenous. And reimbursement ratio might also be endogenous, right? But so this, just as a preliminary check on the 3 things. So what we do here is we estimate this 3 equation by seemingly uncorrelated regression, okay? And we see there is indeed a negative and significant coefficient on the public transport support, right? And look at the ratio. It seems to be always 2 to 1, 2 to 1. So they are very proportional, okay? So we first test whether the 3 equations are independent. So this Bloch-Pagan test rejects that they are independent. So estimating by SIR is beneficial, okay? And then we look at the ratio, as I said, is always around 2, right? So we test whether they are actually proportional, okay? And this chi-square test does not reject the coefficient are proportional and equal to 2. This is this test, okay? So this is sum versus public support. This is sum versus medical reimbursement. So that means we compare these 2 coefficients. So this is female samples. This is female sample. Where do I have the female thing? Yeah, this is looking at all the female twins, females, okay, only females, and looking at whether they have a male twin, whether they have public access to public provision, public support, okay? And then we constrain the coefficient to be 2 to 1, and we estimate constrain the model. So now we impose that the coefficient is 2 to 1, okay? And we again do the test whether the 3 equations are independent. Again, the Bloch-Pagan test rejects the hypothesis they are independent. And then we conduct a further test whether this constrained model versus unconstrained model is fine. And it does not reject, this likelihood ratio test does not reject that the constrained model is fine. So in conclusion, parents instill filial piety into children for old age support. Okay? Whether it's for cost or whether it's for few preference, they have definitely an angle towards sun, okay? And they do that through the home teaching. And also the policy implication, public provision of older age support has additional cost of weakening the forging of the filial piety. And the potential weakening of this may reduce private provision of older age support in the long term. So this application, this crowd out, does not rely on operative bequest or any strong things. It will be taking place as long as there is strong public support. And that's not surprising, right? So in developed country where the public support or social security is more prevalent, then this traditional family support is much weaker or less prevalent than in China. Okay, I think I'm doing fine in time. 2 minutes, okay.
Do you think your result will be the same if you exclude identical twins out of your sample?
If
you exclude identical twins.
Exclude identical twin.
Yeah, because you are using, it seems like you are using not identical twins in the sample, right?
Well, they are all there, because whether you have male co-twin or whether you have so it's both same-sex twin and opposite-sex twin. They are all there.
What I mean is, if they are identical twins, they have the same sex.
Then, if just same sex, then the male twin thing is always equal to 1. We need this variation, whether you have male co-twin or not. And we want to contrast the different sex twins with the same sex twins. Yeah.
I wondered whether the prospect of support in old age from the state and from the employer may be improving sufficiently rapidly in China that you could do some dynamic analysis and see whether already within the period where you've been collecting data there's any change in the coefficients.
Change in the coefficients for...
To reflect the remarks you were making right.
Right. But those questions are only asked in this wave, not in the previous wave. Yeah.
Yes, but just time. The date is changing all the time. What people can expect in the future.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we can look into this or maybe we can do one more round later on.
Children are different ages, right? Children are different ages. Within this data set, you have children born in different years.
Right.
So you can use age as your proxy for the time within this cross-section. So the most current children, the effect might be weaker than the ones that were born 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. So we can just interact this with age. Okay. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
I guess time is up.
Yeah.
Let's join us to have